We are here to talk about Hayao Miyazaki. Does that sound right to everybody? Yeah? Do we have fans in the audience?
Oh, yeah.
We have fans on the panel too. Big fans on the panel. We are going to have the panelists introduce themselves so that you know who you're talking to. Tell us a little bit about yourself and then tell us your favorite Miyazaki films. I'm putting an S on the end there because I think if you try to narrow it down, we'll be sitting here waiting while you go, I don't care. Spit them out. Spit all of them out if you can do them fast enough. What are your favorites?
So my name is Richie Franklin, and I am an author, and my background is actually in film acting and film critique. I lived in LA. I owned a production studio for a short amount of time, and shot short films, and have worked on many short films, many commercials, as well as feature films, and award-winning critique. My favorite Miyazaki films,
yeah,
right?
See,
if I can just spout them out.
Too hard.
So I absolutely, it's Spirited Away, which I'll just take right away, and then I love The Wind Rises, I love Nausicaa, Valley of the Wind, and I love The Castle of Cagliostro.
Good choices.
My name is Megan Lloyd. I'm a storyboard artist and a screenwriter in animation. I have a deep love and respect for Miyazaki because he is kind of like the king of all storyboarding. And we'll get to that a little bit later on the panel, but I know right off I have one Miyazaki film that's my absolute favorite. It's Howl's Moving Castle that I saw when I was 14, and it's, I do want to come back to this in the panel because I want to get around to everybody, but it changed my life, who I was as a person, and completely how I saw myself.
I'm Richard Teasdale. I edit videos. I worked on some short films, Creatures of Whitechapel, Kiss the Devil in the Dark, and Evening with My Comatose Mother. I'm also the deputy director of Film Quest, which is a local film festival here in Provo. It's a genre film festival. So, and my favorite Miyazaki films are I also like Howl's Moving Castle. Spirited Away is also good, and I really like My Neighborhood.
I am Charlie Holmberg. I am an author. I write fantasy and romance for young adults and adults. And my favorite film from him by far is Howl's Moving Castle. That's my favorite film, period. And I would probably say my runner-up would be My Neighbor Totoro.
Can everyone hear in the back? Are you guys hearing it very well? No? So we'll have to speak up really loud because we don't have a mic system for this room.
Okay. You gotta be loud. I can do that. My name is Shelly Brown. I write middle grade children's fiction. So I have a book called Mustaches for Maddie and Squint and Ghost Sitter and books like that. I would say mine is Howl's. I feel like a repeat. But my kids would turn on, I liked it, when it came out, but my kids would watch it, and it would be playing in the background as I'm doing things around the house, and just listening to it again and again and again. I was just like, oh my gosh, I love this movie. It just is got a really big place in my heart, just some of the lines and some of the message of that movie.
I feel bad that I didn't say Princess Mononoke, so I'm just going to say that one really fast.
No, I think if you're feeling that guilty feeling right now, spit it out,
Yes.
okay?
I'm going to say, I agree with that. I also love Kiki's Delivery Service.
Kiki is
I love Miyazaki movies.
I know.
Yeah,
I have all the DVDs, I have the art books, I have the storyboard books.
And The Cat Returns is probably one of my favorites just for the fun of it. All right. And introduce Hayao Miyazaki. What do you guys know about him? Just spit it out. We're just going to shout out stuff.
He originally worked for Toei Animation, which I believe
Yes.
did Sailor Moon.
Yes.
He grew up in the aftermath of the U.S. bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and it's one of the reasons why his films are so heavily anti-war.
He likes pigs. He does. He said that. And he likes flying and airplanes. Porco Rosso. He's obsessed with planes.
Well, his father.
His family. Oh,
Go ahead.
I already got to say a sound bite.
Oh,
Yeah, your turn.
His father owned an airplane company prior to the war, which, if you've seen The Wind Rises, which is beautiful, it's all about the creation of the Japanese Zero, which is interesting because I thought this is going to be a war film, and it's not. It's about peace. It's about the creation of it. It's really it's a beautiful film, and it relates very closely to his family because his father owned an airplane company, and his mother got tuberculosis, both of which happened in.
Right. His mom was sick when he was little. Yep. Any other things, guys? I bet you can come up with something.
Just real fast, probably spoiler warning for Miyazaki movies here.
Yeah.
So we will probably discuss plot twists and endings to the films as we continue on this panel.
That's a really good point. Any other thoughts?
I heard that he just came out of retirement.
He always comes out of retirement.
Again.
No, it was like 3 days ago, though. Like,
Yeah, and he wants to make a film by 2020.
son. Yeah. With his son. He is a perpetual, he's an animator, you know, most of you guys know that. He does the actual animation, storyboards, screenwriter. He has a mangas out there where he did all of the cartooning as well for that. That was with his first stuff.
Nausicaa.
Was it with Nausicaa?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Well,
in
in Lupin the Third, right? Castle of Cagliostro is based on a manga,
Right.
and so yeah. Which I love this fact about him. When he was in high school, he actually burned all of his work, or he destroyed all of his work,
Yeah.
because it was so influenced by other animators that he wanted to.
He was afraid that he was too, he was afraid of copying. You know how there's that level of learning where you just like literally trace? And he felt like his work was literally tracing. I think as artists, no matter what your field is, and that's probably a lot of people in this room, no matter what your field is, there will be a level where you have to go through that step of like learning to trace even. And that's okay. That's like actually a normal part of learning. You just can't submit that as your work. You just have to say, no, this is just me, you know, acting like Jim Carrey. Like, this isn't my work, this is me repeating Jim Carrey. Eventually, as an actor, I'll figure out my own work. This is just me doing a fan fiction of Harry Potter. I can't like take credit for this because I stole the characters in the world.
Or make, 50 Shades of Grey.
Right.
City of Glass.
Or
Some people can, they have no conscience. They don't burn stuff in college. But, okay, next question.
Can I throw one more thing out there?
Absolutely, please.
This is actually something I learned recently. Miyazaki's a pantser. And for
Yes.
those who don't know that, when you make a story, you either just make it up as you go or you outline it. And he will start storyboarding not knowing where the story's going.
And he has started animating stories where he's still not sure where
Can I
he's going.
jump in on that?
Yes, please.
So, Miyazaki is a master of my specific branch of animation, which is storyboarding. I've worked for Skydance and I've worked for DreamWorks. And when American films generally make a movie, the script is written first. It's split up between 4 to 10 different storyboard artists. We're assigned our specific scenes. We do our interpretation of them where we take the script, we draw like a black and white, almost like a
How many of you guys
slide
have never
presentation.
seen a storyboard?
You usually will probably recognize the very
Like,
rough black
yeah.
and white drawings from
You
a
guys-
DVD or so. And we'll get critiqued by the director, we'll do it again. When all the scenes are drawn, we'll edit them together, watch them as a whole film crew with our executives, get notes, take the whole movie down, put it all up in storyboards again, and we'll work on a film for the better part of 3 years with a team of multiple artists. Hayao Miyazaki writes the film as he storyboards the entire movie on his own. And you can actually purchase books that are his rough storyboard drawings for his entire film. If you're interested in like kind of seeing the original, you can see his storyboard drawing and then his directions for acting and camera movements written out to the side. And he has complete creative control over every single shot throughout the film.
So sometimes when it goes someplace crazy, you'll get it. Passing it back down, what do you guys think sets Miyazaki's work apart from other? I mean, there's animation for a long time. We've had animation, feature films since '38 with Snow White. So
I think one thing that really stands out to me is that his work is it feels non-traditional to it in a sense. Like the stories aren't necessarily like big arcs. Sometimes they're a little episodic at times, but they're simple and they have a lot of emotion and they have a lot of heart to them. And to me, I think that's a big.
I love that.
Yeah, going off of that, like, he's weird. Like, his films are weird. Like, I remember when I saw Spirited Away the first time, I was telling my cousin about it. I'm like, it's really good, but it's really weird. But it's really good, but it's really weird. You know, like, just going back and forth, like, he's so different. And that's why he's such an inspiration to me. Is like, I want to be so different. And something else that he does that I think is so interesting is that he simplifies his people and then amps up his backgrounds. Like, Hal's bedroom is insane. He has such an eye for detail, like a crazy eye for detail. And while I think he is pretty consistent in a lot of his themes, I think that you don't really know what he's gonna do next. You can't guess for him.
Actually, I was watching Mononoke with my children, and it was getting a little bit intense right at the beginning. And the kids were like, can we watch this? And I was like, it's a Miyazaki film, nobody's gonna die. Was I wrong? You never know what you're gonna get.
So kind of jumping off of this, so a lot of times in our writing and our novels, especially for those of us who are outliners, we will plot point, plan, I need my character to do this specific thing, this specific time, and things that don't contribute to like our goal or our focus in what we're making, we cut it out. And Miyazaki instead will give us a character and will give us a world that they honestly explore, almost to an extent, almost like an open world video game where, you know, you have a scene in Spirited Away where she's riding the train. You see all these other train stops, these strange shadowy figures, no explanation of what they are. They don't come back in Act 3 to suddenly help us save the day. He just sort of opens up his imagination and lets us go along with this character as we learn about magic in a world that we may not have seen before.
What I love about that particular scene is that in many ways, he's seeing the world through the eyes of a child. And I think that that's, you know, like, things aren't explained to children. A lot of times they're like, I don't know, that guy was weird. And then life just keeps going.
And it should be remarked that he can do that because he is now at the top of the creative food chain and he has no executives or editors or marketing team saying, we can't sell this. It's Miyazaki. He can sell whatever he wants.
It doesn't affect the quality of his films either. Like sometimes when you get to that point, I won't mention any names or Lucas, but you don't have somebody telling you no, and
It's a
then,
problem.
Yeah, like
Right.
your quality suffers.
All of a sudden, episodes 1 through 3 happen, and
Yeah.
you regret it.
But yeah, that hasn't affected Miyazaki. So.
Well, and you look at things like, I mean, you talk about, you know, the scene where they're on the train, where that's such a small part at the beginning of it. And you think about the story arc of what Hero's trying to accomplish in Spirited Away. It's to save her parents, right, who have turned into pigs. But the journey that she goes on, I love your example of the open world RPG because there's everything can be interacted with and everything becomes a part of it. And you have characters like No Face and you know, who he eats all this stuff. There's this whole arc about, you know, what happens with him. But he ends up just being dropped off with the grandmother out in the middle of nowhere.
He's chill.
He's chill. And the character of Sebulba, I think is the woman's name, that's over the whole bathhouse.
Yubaba?
Yubaba, thank you.
Sebulba is George Lucas.
Is George Lucas.
Yubaba.
Yubaba's character is not really evil. She's just who she is.
Yeah.
And that's not wrong and it's not right. It's just who she is.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
that's a great point. A lot of Miyazaki films don't necessarily have a villain. Do you guys, I mean, going off of that, why do you think that is? I mean, some do. Like, if you start at
what
the
the
beginning,
best one is Princess Mononoke, because that's the most gray area movie ever. And I
Yes.
love it, because I'm like, if all politics could just be like this, where it's like, we could just be the Ashitaka in our world. Because it's like, oh, obviously, you know, the forest beasts are bad because they're the ones who like ran through the village and hurt Ashitaka. Oh wait, actually they're good. Oh, Irontown is bad. Oh no, they're providing for all these people and taking care of the lepers. Like they're not bad. And it's like,
Then who's the bad guy?
you know.
I have an answer. There isn't one.
Yeah.
So a lot of his films, Mononoke is yes. Let me clarify, and then if you want to, yeah. So Mononoke is a good example, and I say Howl's and Spirited Away are also another examples. We meet characters who we expect to be antagonists, who we expect to fight against us the whole time. Yubaba, the Witch of the Waste, you know, the creatures, the Irontown, and as we learn, as we explore the world and learn more about them and see from their point of view, they're not that different from us, and it goes back to his underlying theme of peace is always attainable and peace is always desirable.
I think this is really punched out in Nausicaa, if you guys have seen Nausicaa Valley of the Wind, which is kind of an environmental piece. It's a good one. But it is, you've got these warring factions, and you feel like she's going to be the key to help her own people, which she is. But it opens up as you move into the story that other people are trying to do intrigue, and that the world has become so hostile because of all this fighting. And that it's as we bring peace into the world that we can bring back all the beauty of the world, which I'm sure is influenced by his roots after the World War II and the bombings.
Yeah, well, those are the themes. I feel like the three themes that we see from him the most is like he's very pro-pacifism. He talks a lot about nature, and he talks a lot about human nature. And so almost in a lot of these films, the bad guy is our own human nature, right? It's like overcoming
Isn't
ourselves.
that Howl and
Like,
speaking of a pacifist with
Nausicaa a
human
lot.
nature and yeah.
Yeah.
Nausicaa.
Or like, what was it, in Castle in the Sky? Because like, all these humans just want to use Laputa to be a weapon. And so what does Laputa do? Gets rid of the weapons. And now, and transcends once it does that.
And cuts her hair. Not her specifically, but usually a Miyazaki character, when they undergo a significant change, will
They
also
cut their
undergo a
hair.
hair change.
Yeah.
Either they'll change the color, or they'll like cut it, or
Or
just be
both.
completely different. Yeah.
For Sophie.
Any other themes that you're thinking that you've seen?
Not exactly like I would say visually a theme is that the everyday is beautiful.
Oh, I
Like
love
you look
that.
at a scene of someone eating breakfast, and it is the most mouth-watering bacon and eggs that you've ever seen in your life. Or someone's
There's so
just-
much sweeping.
And then they touch each other's hands while they're cooking it over calcifer.
Or someone's taking the train to work. Someone's walking around town, and his backgrounds. I want to bring what we said about backgrounds. They're blown up. They're so detailed. They are not photorealistic. He takes a leaf, and he doesn't just draw the leaf he sees, or directs his background painters, because no one man can do everything as much as he would love. But in a Miyazaki film, the art style is never photorealistic. This is what it is. This is the most beautiful version of what this could be. This is the most glistening bacon you've ever seen. This water is so clear blue, and the bubbles are like perfectly shiny. And thematically, that goes along with his naturism and humanism, is that people are beautiful and the world is beautiful, even in something as small as a table with scratches in it.
And yet when we say beautiful, it's not like that fancy beautiful. It's not like Disney, or like a lot of anime beautiful. It's a very normal, like normal is beautiful, I think.
It's like Saturday morning cartoons, kind of like amped up to
Right.
a much better level. Yeah.
Were you pointing out something?
Michelle's raised her hand for questions, so it's your
Hi.
twice.
Michelle,
I want her to speak.
So, two things. I disagree on the Princess Mononoke. I think that the short, ugly monk on stilts is the clear bad guy.
That's a good point.
He's actually portrayed as a friend at the very beginning. He was the first one. He was the only character who was portrayed as a friend from the beginning, and he's the character who's the bad guy. But my other thing is that it's, you talked about a leaf and stuff like that. Well, Hayao Miyazaki thought that machinery was beautiful too, and so all of his machinery is beautiful, but almost all of his machinery is weathered and worn, yet still beautiful. So I just thought it was so interesting
That
how
the history of a place adds to its beauty.
how his forests are so green and beautiful, and his machinery is so rusty and old. Anyway.
Yeah, it's a really
Thanks,
interesting
Michelle.
thing. How nature renews itself and stays clean there.
Why do you think that he has like mainly like female protagonists?
Yeah, that's definitely. She's asking about female protagonists. I'm just saying it louder because you're facing us, not them. So, thoughts there?
Well, I think we have a thought here about that.
So, kind of an answer to that would be like, I think that Miyazaki picked female characters because they're a lot easier and a lot more like relatable to most people to portray a character who's really pacifist and really just nice by nature, is to just pick a female character, because for most of your audiences, if you pick a female character, it's a lot more believable, and it just looks a lot.
Yeah,
Just,
I would like
super nice.
Yeah, I'd like to disagree with that point a bit. Like choosing a female protagonist doesn't necessarily mean that we'll believe this is a pacifist character, because the protagonist of Princess Mononoke, Porco Rosso, he has male protagonists as well that follow the same thing. To answer your question, I think it's because he does not exhibit the same sexism we see throughout the industry. That he can tell a story about a soft-hearted boy or a soft-hearted girl because he believes in the humanism, the natural good of all people. And something that's really great about his studio is he hires a very balanced mix of both male and female animators.
But the female bathroom is bigger. Have you guys heard that?
What?
The women's bathroom is much bigger. It's like twice the size of the male bathroom.
We understand.
And I don't know why I learned that.
And there are times, a lot of times in our own American media where a lot of female-led media is looked down upon and sort of poo-pooed as, oh, that's just for girls because it stars a girl. But do you know anybody who's like, I like Miyazaki, but you know he does a lot of really girly movies.
They don't really feel girly.
They
though.
don't. Well, it's because none of them have to stand up and say, Father always wanted a son, but he had me. I'm as good as any boy.
Yeah.
Also, I am a girl. And that's a sort of, sorry, we'll pass on to somebody else, but that's sort of a caveat that we will often do in our media, trying to say that when we try and say, oh, a female protagonist can do anything, we'll end that with, a female protagonist can do anything a male protagonist can do, which even though we're trying to say, oh, they're equal, we are setting up in the set of our sentence that there's a underlying premise that men are already up here, but do you know what? If we look around, I think women are too. And Miyazaki is, again, I'm going to use the word humanism one more time.
An interesting thing to go along with that is that a lot of those protagonists are children. And children kind of don't see the difference. Like society puts it on them, and so kids who are more saturated with that information, they absorb it, and so you will find exceptions to this. But in general, like you hand a little kid a book, you know, like or tell them a story with a boy or a girl, and as long as that story is just a good story, they don't know, they don't care. And so like they're kind of dwelling, these characters themselves dwell in a world where they don't see that difference.
I think that one thing that's interesting is sometimes the protagonists of his movies, their growth, the arc that they go through is really not so much how they become a different person, but how they become the best part of what they are. Like they don't become these like amazing heroes most of the time. They become heroes because they rise to the occasion of what they're capable of doing.
So, go ahead. Sorry,
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think Kiki is a fantastic example of that, right? Because it is this young woman going out to make it on her own, and I loved your observation, Megan, about it's not a might makes right scenario. For her, the whole arc is having confidence in who she is and what she does, and then learning to embrace, you know, the society around her type deal. And she even loses her powers when she begins to lose that faith in herself. And so much of it is developing that confidence, developing who you are. It's that coming of age that is very different than what we like so much in the Western ideal, which is what really turned me on to Miyazaki to begin with. Was I said, this feels so much like a breath of fresh air. It's not some superhero jumping out of an airplane with a sword, you know, or whatever, that's cool in its own right? Mm-hmm. But it's a girl or a young kid or even an adult who's been changed into a pig or whatever, who is going through their personal journey that isn't, I can beat up the world and therefore I can make it better. it is I have to learn how to fit, which is such a good observation, Richard, right? That I can learn to exist in this world, and that's so empowering, and maybe that's what resonated so well with me, was because I wanted that in my own life. I wanted that self-realization.
Can I'd like to talk a little bit about what I mentioned earlier about Howl's Moving Castle, and what it meant for me. Being a 14-year-old girl is very hard. A lot of us in the room have gone through it, I can see. And we're really bombarded with, you should look this way, you should fit in this way, and it's very hard to look at yourself in the mirror in the mornings and be like, I don't look that way, I'm ugly, my hair's frizzy, or like I have glasses, I have braces, all these things. And I watched this film, and for a quick sum of Howl's Moving Castle, there's a very plain looking girl who down talks herself a lot, and she is cursed to become an old woman. And she continues to down talk herself in a very humorous way, saying like, well, now the clothes you wear finally suit you, or you're better as an old woman anyway. And she goes to find this handsome wizard to be cured. And I go into this movie thinking very hard that, like many fairy tales, love, true love from someone else will, make her beautiful again. And the message of the movie is, she has not been cursed to look like an old woman. She's been cursed to look on the outside how she feels on the inside. And throughout the film, she vacillates is not the word I'm looking for, but I think with this hand motion, I think you'll get what I'm going at. She will switch back and forth between being older and being younger, not realizing it, especially when she's speaking passionately out for someone else and not thinking
like
of
every
herself.
other word, she loses 10 years.
Yeah, and so when I got to the end of the film and the hero, and they do have a true love moment, but when he says, you look beautiful, he says, she replies, do you think so? So do I. And that hit me so hard. That may not be the intended theme of the film, but I walked away from that being like, I should treat myself better, and then I can be the way that I've always wanted to look inside if I just believe in it.
Can I also follow up on one thing
Yes.
you said? No, just about the true love. Something I love that they do in that is Turnip turns back because he got true love's kiss. It's like, too bad your true love loves somebody else. But it's just like kind of sticking it to the idea of soulmates at the same time. It's like, you're not going to be destined for just one person. It can work out in another way. I just love that too, that it's just bending the norm, you know?
I appreciate you making this comment, because I watched this. It was a public letter from this girl up in Seattle on YouTube, which was an open apology to Stephanie Myers. She was like, "We're sorry." Have you seen it? Yes, Lindsay Ellis. Yep.
Watch Lindsay Ellis on YouTube. Write that name down, everyone.
It's good. But her apology to Stephanie Myers, she says, part of the problem with Twilight, with why we love to hate Twilight, is because as a culture we hate teenage girls. And the more I've thought about that, she's like, we hate their clothes, we hate their whiny media, we hate
their boy bands.
We hate their boy bands. We just love to hate. And she has Teen Girl Squad from,
Teen Girl Squad.
But the more I've thought about that, and I have a teenage daughter, the more I've thought about that, the more I've thought, that's kind of true. We try to push them so fast through that stage of life. And because it is kind of awkward, and if we bring it back to Miyazaki, and a lot of his heroes kind of fit into that realm, I love that, and I personally feel we should embrace more that age group, particularly of girls who are being put down and put into specific, boxes.
You said something about his character design, about the simplification of it, and how beautifully he caricatures and captures what a very young girl looks like, what Chihiro looks like, what the princess looks like in any of his films. American media is terrible at this. I just found out, you guys may have heard me say this in an earlier panel, I found out this week, to my extreme shock, Princess Jasmine from the Aladdin film is only 15.
Yeah. Seriously?
Yeah.
She looks like 20.
She does!
Snow White is 14.
Snow White is 4. Okay, so general Disney princesses: Snow White 14, Aurora 16, Jasmine 15,
Ariel 16.
Ariel 16. I'm 16. I can do what I want. You're my baby,
bro.
Yeah. And then if you look at young kids live action television from maybe 10, 15 years ago, I'd say like Lizzie McGuire, that sort of era, and you compare it with the teenagers we see today who wear much older clothing are styled by the television stylists, I should say. I don't think the teens are making the choice on their own. They are made up to look much older than they are because we don't respect the transition from being a child to being a woman. It's just, Daniel Radcliffe said something really interesting in an interview when he was doing a play, Nude, Scandalous, on Broadway, and the interviewer was like, "Aren't you afraid of being sexualized?" And he replied, "There were countdown clocks to the day that my co-star, Emma Watson, turned 17 and would be legal in England." And he's like, "We sexualize all the women I know, so no, I'm not afraid to be with that horse."
Well, and I mean, if we apply that to Miyazaki, one of the things I love, because I love the whole the manga genre, the whole aesthetic of of Japan animation and things like that. But I remember when I was a kid, I was introduced to this one that I thought was hilarious, but it was just riddled with pornography and riddled with violent murder and death and things like that. And yeah, they all like it's like par for the course. You have to have the low angle upshot of the short skirts and things like that. And so one of the things that I loved about Miyazaki, and my introduction was Spirited Away, was that there is very little sexualization, if any, of Chihiro at all, right? And she's a little girl, right? Kind of creepy.
10.
But there, I mean, especially as he's advanced through his career.
There's women in the story. You could have totally.
Oh yeah.
Not really. I mean, it's not there, and it's a bathhouse. You know how much?
Yeah.
It's a
You
bathhouse.
can easily have naked women coming out of the
Right,
bathhouse
yeah.
and things like that.
But
Giant,
instead we got
voluptuous
blood
spirits. Yes.
Well, the commentary that's on Spirited Away, right? Because that's a commentary on sex trafficking. Right, the reason that No Face is trying, it's like the hidden message, right? Like the way that they have the bathhouse written, and like Yubaba is what you would call the madams who ran brothels, and No Face is trying to give Chihiro money because it's like symbolizing he's trying to buy her virginity, and like it was.
I didn't catch that.
It's a very. It's not,
I can see it, but I didn't.
He's so subtle about it because he doesn't get political, which is great. But like there is this underlying thing about sex trafficking that's in Spirited Away and him making commentary on it, So he really is just like super supportive.
Well, and if you think about how deep of a feeling and a message that is, and if you come at your art with such emotion, even if you don't come at it head on like that, I mean, if you come with that underlying heart to it, people are gonna feel it, even if they don't know what they're feeling, like they're gonna say, something's wrong here, something's going on here. And they're gonna have an emotional response, even if they can't exactly pinpoint out.
Or like Howl's Moving Castle, like fractured families.
Right.
Like all these outcasts and misfits, making a family.
We have a question here in the front.
I just want to comment that even in Nausicaa, he chooses not to sexualize her. And I feel like if he had chosen to sexualize her, it really would have taken away from her character because it would have focused more on her body and not what she was capable of doing. And she went on to do incredible things.
And how easy would it have been to do that?
Yeah.
That would have been the easy route, huh? He doesn't take the easy route.
Sexism is a societal construct. It's up to all of us, help break it down. Please be kind to everyone in your lives. Miyazaki in an interview was once quoted as saying, "Anime was a mistake." And that simple image has been screen capped and shared all the time, usually as a reaction image to when you see a trailer for one of these sort of trailers. But he goes on to elaborate in the interview itself. Anime was a mistake, and I'm afraid I don't know the exact quote because that's the one line that stands out. But he goes on to talk about the extreme sexualization of these girls. Think about maybe a superhero character who is a woman and wears these extreme vacuum-packed clothes, or even something that's very revealing. And a lot of times in the books, I'm thinking more specifically Starfire in some of the more recent Titans books, or even Momo, a character from My Hero Academia.
Oh, yeah.
Their clothes show a ton of skin because their powers, they have to expose their skin. It's part of their superpower, which it's given an in-universe explanation, but that was drawn by this universe person who, and I'm not saying that we should completely cover head to toe all women all the time, but you can tell like when the intent is done. If you compare, and we're going a little bit off of Miyazaki, if you compare how Patty Jenkins shot Wonder Woman in her film, and compare that to how she was portrayed in the Justice League movies, where when she's doing a high kick in Patty Jenkins, you're like watching her from the side and you're watching her arms tense, and when she's doing a high kick in a Zack Snyder film, she's doing it upskirt to the camera. And it's sometimes an unconscious bias that we don't even realize we're having when we're creating attractive characters.
Well, and it's a really good comment, and it's a good comment for this panel because that, I mean, sex sells. To be very frank, I learned that as a kid, is that it's going to sell. People will buy tickets to go and see a beautiful, usually woman, or, you know, or man. You put a gorgeous man hunk on the screen, you know, with his shirt off, that sells too. But it's unfortunate, but it does. And what's so, and this, I mean, it goes back to the original comment of what I love so much about Miyazaki is he had very high critical success and very high commercial success. Some of the best-selling films in Japan when he released them early, and then, you know, Academy Awards and things, without having to, you know, revert to that. Revert's not the right word, but resort to, you know, to sexuality in his films.
Spirited Away is still the #1 highest-grossing film in Japan.
Wow, it helps that.
And I think sex sells because we are constantly told that it does. And even if we're not
And it's
comfortable-
okay.
Yeah, and it's okay. And
Oh
so,
no, I mean, we're told it's okay.
yeah, we're told it's fine. You know, we just have to put this in. If you watch the pilot of pretty much any show, there will be a more sexually graphic scene or a more immodestly dressed man or woman than you will find in the rest of it because people want to set up your expectations in the pilot, and that's usually how they do it. And we're at a writer's conference. I'm saying it's great to have intimacy in your stories. I think it's awesome to have, you know, sexy shirtless barbarians and like really awesome cat ladies. Like there's storytelling potential there, and it is fun. But you should think about and be considerate of the audience that you're giving it to, and the history of how those type of portrayals have been generally presented to us without question in the media we've consumed our entire lives.
I think one thing that works really well for him is because he doesn't throw in a lot of the stuff that we're used to seeing, especially in the Western world. There's an innocence and it's like an emotion that he gets to. Like one thing that I found really interesting about his films is like you feel the emotion on the character's face. Like I don't think I've watched a lot of animated films over the years, and there's great animated films, but the emotion that comes through his drawings is
Had to bring up
fantastic.
Grave of the Fireflies.
My kids.
That's a can't watch that.
No, they've all seen it. I bought it and just popped it in. It was one of those mistakes. It's a mom mistake. No, but I think that there's an innocence. I think that innocence is something that is universal, right? We can all relate to innocence because we've all been innocent. And so it becomes something, a theme that we can all grasp onto and we can all understand, instead of trying to say, you know, extreme maturity, you know, which is, you know, like some of us are like, yeah, okay. It's like junior high all over again. I totally know what they're talking about, you know?
So, in animation, we'll nerd out about specific shots in films, like the shot in Beauty and the Beast in the ballroom where they're dancing and twirling, and that was hand-drawn. There's a shot in Spirited Away that we usually talk about when we're referencing character acting, and it's when Chihiro is putting her shoes on in the bathhouse, and she taps her foot just twice, like before she runs. And that's just such like a cute, sweet, like observational moment of, yeah, that, you know, when kids put their shoes on, they have to wiggle around and to do it. So there's a Japanese concept called ma, and it means silence, but it's a specific silence, and it means between a noise. So like the space between the words as you speak, or the silence between your claps. And a lot of times in Western animation, they're very dialogue driven. It's talk, 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 and I think you've all experienced that, like, oh yeah, I watched this movie I saw when I was a kid, and I get the jokes now that just went over my head. But there's very little silence. And something that is really gorgeous in a Miyazaki film that I think emotionally resonates with the audience is when we sit with a character or we just follow them through their day, and there's no talking, but we just get to sit and almost be there in the moment with them.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of his films is just that observation of his films are very quiet in general. Most of about.
Well, you watch like a little bug crawl
Yeah.
up
Yeah.
something, and the bug's not part of the story. It's just what's going on in the world.
But it gives an emotion. It gives feeling.
Yeah, it does, definitely.
Roll
There's a
pulls.
question.
Okay,
There's a question in the front corner.
Oh yeah, I was just wondering. It's kind of a silly question, but it's like, how do you spell mom? I don't want to make sure.
M.A.
It's just M.A.
Yeah, it's M.A. I
Well,
don't
it's
know.
Japanese.
It's a
I don't know
Japanese
what
word,
the
so-
character for
The
it is, and I'm
romanization.
sorry. Yeah, it's just.
I did see another
Mom,
hand
but-
over here.
Yeah,
We have
so,
a few minutes, so we will open it up to questions if any of you guys have
So
questions.
with this, very quiet, explorative way of telling stories, how do you think he's able to create such massive suspense without being plot-driven?
Because you care. He creates people that you care about, so if they're in any danger whatsoever, even if it's their mom's coming into the room and they're going to get yelled at, and that's all that's going to happen, you're like, oh, don't yell at them, they didn't do it on purpose.
It's Alfred Hitchcock, The Bomb at the Dinner Party. There's a filmmaking exercise that Alfred Hitchcock talks about where you have a dinner party and there's people talking for 12 minutes and at the end a bomb goes off and kills them all. That's terrible. We love these characters. We've been with them for 12 minutes. Do the same scene again. Show one shot of the bomb ticking underneath the table, and then you spend the rest of the 12 minutes, no matter what they say to each other, you're just waiting for that. And I think that magical catastrophes or creatures are indicated early on. Like, we can see where these worlds could go badly. We see how dangerous the bathhouse is. We see how
Run away.
like, dangerous the castle can be. And I think we want to know what happens next. And also because it doesn't follow a normal plot, we can't say, we are 23 pages in. It's time to break into 2 and for the dark night of the soul. We can't do that with his films, so it draws our attention.
And we can't say, oh, we've been introduced to this one thing, it's going to be important later. No, we don't know. Any other questions? Yes.
This is going to sound terrible, but don't judge me for it. But what's a way to show something or someone being exploiting without it being a bad way? For example, like say there's a race of people that thrive being enslaved rather than with freedom. They get more fulfillment with being enslaved rather than making their own choices, or a creature that's the what? The what? Yeah.
Lies.
I think it should be, yeah.
EW.
Yeah, I think it should be.
Are you just looking for like speculative, like fiction type of?
Well, I'm
questions?
putting this in a fiction story, but yeah, these people they function much better serving. They don't want freedom.
Why?
Because
So,
what's that thing called in the Stormlight Archive when the
the
parshmen
parshmen?
downgrade themselves?
Yeah, adult form.
So I might actually jump on this one. This might get me in trouble too, so I bring this up. So I grew up overseas. I grew up in the Far East, and I had what we called an ama for a long time, and she was not an indentured servant. She was a live-in maid who lived in our home, and the reason she lived in our home was because she had come from an impoverished country, and she was looking for a better life. She wanted to come to our country, and which was Singapore at the time. She wanted to come to our country and start going to school and start doing all these other things. But she didn't have an education or a background or the financial resources to come to Singapore and really build her own life. And so we offered her room and board. We offered her, we paid her. She had friends and she went out, but it was just kind of a live-in job where she lived in our home. So there was a very symbiotic kind of, in my opinion, right, a very symbiotic sort of thing in that relationship where it helped her. We helped pay, for all of her schooling and things like that helped her go through that. One other thought on that, because I think it can work. I think in the United States we are very, very, there was a lot of atrocious things done through slavery that we should not repeat.
Yes.
And so it's a very dangerous thing to talk about, but there are cultures where it has worked in history as well as around the world. But again, indentured against your will, that's a different story. Another thing I would put on that is if you look at the Israelites in the Bible, when Moses leads them out of Egypt, they don't know how to live free because they've been enslaved for so long. And that's part of the reason they were wandering in the wilderness for 40 years, was so that their children could be raised free to get that into their mind because they were so used to being enslaved.
And I think something you can do is have other characters within the world comment and debate upon it within your text. And not only that, but as you approach this story, please come from a mindfulness of the people who say the slaves are happy are the people who own them.
Yeah.
And quite often that trope you get of the happy person who's underneath these awful, terrible circumstances are the people in the positions of privilege and power who convince themselves that, you know what, they're better this way.
It is time. You guys have been excellent. I feel like there was one hand that was like dying. Is there a hand that was like dying, like, please let me share something? Okay, you guys are good? You guys have been excellent. So thank you guys so much. I appreciate it. Woo!